The cemetery gates creaked open just as the sun broke through the clouds, spilling pale light across rows of silent stones. What happened next would shatter everything a billionaire thought he understood about loss, fate, and the past he believed was buried forever. Adrian Cross slowed his steps, his polished shoes brushing through fallen leaves as if he were walking through memories instead of a graveyard. At 32, his name ruled boardrooms and headlines. His companies protected millions of digital lives, yet he had failed to protect the one life that mattered most. He came here every month without fail, alone, refusing security, refusing sympathy. This was the only place where his wealth meant nothing. He stopped before a simple stone. No gold. No grand design. Just a name and dates carved with painful finality. He knelt, setting down a small bunch of wildflowers he had picked himself. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice steady but hollow. "I kept my promise." People assumed grief looked dramatic. Tears, breakdowns, visible sorrow. Adrian's grief was quieter, heavier. It lived in his chest, tightening every breath. 3 years had passed since his daughter slipped away from the world, and since then, life had become a routine without color. Success came easily. Joy did not. As he stood, brushing dirt from his coat, a strange sensation crept over him, the feeling of being watched. Adrian glanced around, expecting a groundskeeper or another visitor. Instead, his gaze landed near an old tree at the edge of the path. A small figure stood there. A little girl, no more than 8, wearing a faded sweater and holding a paper flower. She wasn't crying. She wasn't afraid. She was staring straight at him. Adrian took a step forward, and froze. The world seemed to tilt. His heartbeat thundered in his ears as his mind rejected what his eyes were seeing. The same eyes. The same curve of the face. Even the tiny mark near the cheek that only a father would remember. For a terrifying moment, Adrian wondered if grief had finally crossed a line. Because standing a few steps away from his daughter's grave was a child who looked exactly like her. Adrian's legs felt unsteady as he forced himself to breathe. He told himself not to move too quickly, not to scare the child, or himself. The girl remained where she was, studying him with a calm curiosity that felt far too familiar. When she tilted her head, his heart clenched. His daughter used to do that when she was thinking. "Are you lost?" Adrian asked, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. The girl shook her head. "No," her answer was soft, certain. "I like it here. It's quiet." Quiet. The same word his daughter once used when he asked why she loved the old park near their house. Adrian swallowed hard. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently, scanning the area again. No adults. No movement. Just wind and silence. "I don't have any," she said, as if stating a simple fact. "I live nearby." Nearby. Each word pulled him deeper into a moment he didn't understand. He took another step, close enough now to see every detail. The lashes. The dimple that appeared when she almost smiled. This wasn't imagination. This was real. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mila." She clutched the paper flower tighter. "I made this for someone." Adrian glanced at the flower, then at the stone behind him. His chest tightened. "Someone special?" She nodded. "Someone I feel like I know, even though I don't." That sentence struck him harder than any headline or deal ever had. He lowered himself to her level, careful not to overwhelm her. "Do you come here often?" "Sometimes," Mila said. "I feel safe here. Like I'm supposed to be." Adrian's thoughts raced. Coincidence. That was the word his mind clung to, yet his heart rejected it completely. "Mila," he said softly, "how old are you?" 7. Almost 8. The numbers echoed painfully in his mind. The same age his daughter should have been. His throat tightened as he stood again, forcing composure. "I'm Adrian," he said. "Would it be all right if I walked you back? Just to make sure you're safe." She studied him, her gaze searching his face with an intensity beyond her years. Then she nodded. "Okay. You look sad. But kind." As they walked side by side toward the gate, Adrian realized something unsettling. For the first time in years, his chest didn't feel empty. It felt full of questions, and a fragile, dangerous spark of hope. The iron gate came into view, and with every step toward it, Adrian felt as though he were walking away from the past and toward something unknown. Mila hummed softly beside him, an uneven tune that stirred a memory so sharp it made his chest ache. His daughter used to hum like that when she thought no one was listening. "You come here alone?" Adrian asked, keeping his tone light. "Not supposed to," Mila replied, swinging her arms. "But nobody notices when I'm gone for a little while." That answer stayed with him. Beyond the gate stood a modest brick building with faded paint and a sign barely visible through climbing ivy. A place that housed forgotten stories. Mila stopped and pointed. That's where I stay. Adrian followed her gesture, his pulse quickening. The distance between reason and instinct grew thinner with every breath. He crouched again. Mila, do you know anything about where you came from? She shrugged. I was little. A lady brought me. She cried a lot. Then she left. The words landed like stones. Adrian's thoughts raced back through years of unanswered questions, closed files, and a search he had once been told to abandon. He forced himself to stay calm. Do you remember her face? Mila frowned, trying. No. Just her hands. They were shaking. Something shifted inside him, an old ache awakening, paired with a fear he hadn't felt since the day everything changed. Do you have anything she left you? He asked carefully. Mila reached into her pocket and pulled out a thin silver chain. No charm. No engraving. Simple. Familiar. Adrian's breath caught. He had seen that chain before years ago in a drawer he had never opened again. Keep it safe, he said, voice low. She nodded seriously, tucking it away. Will you come back? She asked suddenly. Most people don't. The question pierced him. Adrian straightened, struggling to find words that felt honest. Yes, he said at last. I will. Mila smiled then, fully this time, and the resemblance was undeniable. As she turned and disappeared through the door, Adrian remained frozen outside, his mind spinning. This was no coincidence. Somewhere between loss and fate, a truth waited to be uncovered, and he knew he couldn't turn away, no matter how painful the answers might be. Adrian sat in the back seat of his car long after the engine started, his hands resting motionless on his knees. The city moved outside the window, unaware that his world had just shifted. Every detail replayed in his mind. The girl's voice, the silver chain, the way her smile mirrored a memory he had buried to survive. He had built an empire by trusting logic, yet logic had nothing to say now. That night, sleep refused to come. Adrian stared at the ceiling, counting hours instead of sheep, until a decision finally settled in his chest. By morning he had already set things in motion. Records could be found. Stories could be traced. He had done the impossible before. He could do it again. The next afternoon he returned, carrying a small bag filled with books and warm pastries. He told himself this visit was simple kindness. Nothing more. Yet his pulse quickened when Mila appeared in the doorway, her eyes lighting up in a way that felt dangerously familiar. You came back, she said as if she had never doubted it. I said I would. Adrian handed her the bag. I thought you might like these. She peeked inside, then looked up at him. Nobody ever brings things just because. They sat on a bench near the building talking about school drawings and her favorite stories. Mila spoke freely, unaware of the storm forming behind Adrian's calm expression. Each laugh tightened something in his chest. Each pause deepened his resolve. Do you believe people can lose each other and still find their way back? Mila asked suddenly. Adrian hesitated. I think some connections don't disappear, he replied carefully. They wait. That evening he made a call he had avoided for years. Old contacts answered. Doors that had once closed quietly reopened. Dates, files, and forgotten details resurfaced. Patterns began to form, too precise to ignore. As Adrian stared at the documents spread across his desk, one truth became clear. This was no accident. The past hadn't stayed buried. It had grown, breathed, and was now standing right in front of him, waiting for him to be brave enough to face it. The confirmation arrived quietly, almost cruel in its simplicity. Adrian read the report twice, then a third time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less heavy. They didn't. Dates aligned. Locations overlapped. The unanswered years suddenly had a shape, and it pointed straight back to the girl with the paper flower. Adrian closed the folder and leaned back, staring out at the city lights. Wealth had given him control over markets, over futures, over numbers on screens, but it had never prepared him for this kind of truth. He felt fear, yes, but also something else rising beneath it. Purpose. He returned again, this time without gifts, without excuses. Mila sat beside him, kicking her feet against the bench, unaware that his life was hanging between breaths. You look different today, she observed. I've been thinking, Adrian said honestly, about how some stories begin before we understand them. She considered this. Like when you open a book in the middle? Exactly like that. They walked slowly and Adrian listened more than he spoke. She told him about her dreams of drawing houses with big windows, about how she believed places could remember people. Each word stitched another thread between them. When it was time to leave, Mila reached for his hand. "Don't disappear," she said quietly. Adrian squeezed back, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "I won't." That night, he stood before his daughter's photograph for the first time in years without turning away. "I failed you once," he whispered. "I won't again." The choice was clear now. Not rushed. Not emotional. Certain. The path ahead would be questioned, judged, and complicated. But for the first time since loss reshaped his life, Adrian felt aligned with something greater than success. Hope had returned, not loudly, not boldly, but enough to change everything. The morning Adrian made his decision, the city felt different, as if it were holding its breath with him. He stood once more before the quiet stone, tracing the carved letters with his eyes, not as a man broken by the past, but as one ready to honor it. "I found her," he whispered. "And this time I won't let go." The process unfolded slowly, deliberately. Paperwork. Conversations. Long pauses filled with waiting. Adrian stayed present through it all, refusing shortcuts. Mila watched him with growing trust, unaware of the depth of the promise he was keeping. She simply knew that someone showed up, again and again. One afternoon as they sat drawing together, Mila looked up and asked, "Why do you stay?" Adrian smiled gently. "Because some things matter more than being busy." Weeks later, answers arrived that no document could fully explain. The truth was layered, painful, and human. Not abandonment but fear. Not disappearance but a choice made in desperation. Understanding didn't erase the past, but it softened its sharpest edges. The day Mila walked out holding Adrian's hand, the sky opened with warm light. She squeezed his fingers. "It feels like I'm going home," she said. He knelt beside her. "You are." Life didn't become perfect. There were hard days, questions, and moments of quiet grief. But there was also laughter at breakfast, drawings on the refrigerator, and evenings filled with stories instead of silence. Adrian no longer visited the grave alone. He came with purpose, with gratitude. Loss had once emptied him. Now it had led him somewhere unexpected. Sometimes what we think is the end is only a pause, waiting for us to be ready to begin again.